Some people don't walk into a room to shine. They walk in with a tiny black marker and start lowering everybody else's price tag. You ever notice that? You could be chilling, smiling, existing peacefully, breathing in 4K, and then somebody says something slick in front of other people. A little joke, a little jab, a little, "I'm only kidding," a little fake laugh, a little comment that looks small on the outside. But somehow it lands like a brick. And you're sitting there like, wait, why did that feel so personal? Why did they need an audience for that? And why do I suddenly feel like I'm in a courtroom I didn't agree to attend? If you've ever had somebody try to make you look smaller in public, this video is for you. And I want you to do me a favor right now. In the comments, type, "I saw the trick." Because once you see this behavior clearly, it stops feeling so mystical. It stops feeling like power, and it starts looking like what it really is. A panic move. A cheap performance. A private insecurity trying to become a public event. And Carl Jung. Jung would have looked at this whole situation and said, yeah, that's not really about you. And that, my friend, is where this gets interesting, because sometimes people don't lower your value because you actually have less value. They do it because your presence is making them feel their own lack. And instead of dealing with that feeling like a grown human with Wi-Fi and emotional responsibility, they try to drag the room into it. Let's talk about it, because this gets deep. But don't worry, we're not going to sound like a dusty textbook with sad lighting. We're going to talk like normal people. So let's go. First, let's say the obvious part: nobody says enough. Some people need witnesses. That's why they don't disrespect you in private. That's why they wait for the meeting, the family table, the group chat, the party, the class, the team call, the moment when extra eyes are around. Because for them, it's not enough to feel insecure. They need social proof. They need the room to help them carry a feeling they don't know how to handle by themselves. That's why the attack is public. Not because they're strong, because they need backup. Read that again with your spirit. They need backup. See, if somebody really had peace, they wouldn't need to put on a little show every time another person looked confident, calm, funny, talented, attractive, respected, or just hard to control. But insecure people? Oh, insecure people are creative. They will turn shade into a personality, sarcasm into a weapon, just joking into a hiding place. And that fake, casual tone? Please. That tone has started more emotional chaos than bad Wi-Fi. And this is where Jung comes in. Jung talked about something called the shadow. Now don't leave. This is not spooky forest talk. The shadow is basically the part of you that you don't want to admit is there. The part you hide, the part you deny, the part you shove in the basement and hope never starts making noise. Your jealousy, your insecurity, your need for control, your pettiness, your fear, your envy, your weakness. Even some good stuff too, by the way. Your power, your creativity, your boldness, if you were taught to suppress it. Jung's point was simple. If you don't face what's in you, you start seeing it everywhere else. That's the trick. That's the setup. That's why somebody who lies all the time thinks everybody is shady. That's why a person hungry for attention calls everybody else desperate. That's why somebody obsessed with status starts accusing other people of showing off. That's why the person who secretly feels weak becomes allergic to your confidence. Because what they can't digest inside themselves, they project outside themselves. Jung called that projection. And honestly, projection is one of the most awkward things human beings do. It's like your soul throws a dirty shirt across the room and then blames someone else for the smell. That's projection. And in public settings, projection gets louder, because now there's a crowd, now there's an audience, now there's a stage. And some people don't know how to regulate themselves without turning life into theater. So, if you walk in with something they haven't made peace with in themselves, your presence starts pressing buttons you didn't even touch. You're not even doing anything. You're literally standing there with your face, and for some reason that's too much. You're calm? Problem. You're improving? Problem. You're well-liked? Huge problem. You're not begging for approval? Emergency. You know what really bothers certain people? It's not even your success. It's your self-possession, that quiet thing. That energy that says, I'm here. I don't need to wrestle for oxygen. I don't need to announce myself every 8 seconds. I don't need permission to exist. Oh, that drives the wrong people absolutely insane, because now your existence is confronting a truth they've been trying to avoid. Maybe the game they've been playing for validation is not working. And instead of sitting with that uncomfortable truth, they try to lower your value in public so they can feel taller without growing. That's the move. They don't build, they adjust the camera angle, they don't rise. They step on toes and call it confidence. And the wild part, a lot of people in the room don't even catch it at first. Because public disrespect is rarely dramatic in the beginning. It's sneaky. It comes dressed like humor, concern, advice, honesty, a little side comment, a weird correction nobody asked for, a fake compliment with poison hidden in the middle. You know those. Oh wow, you actually did a good job. You're smarter than I thought. You look nice today. You talk a lot more confidently now. You're brave for wearing that. Oh, we're taking you seriously now. Excuse me. What kind of clearance rack compliment is that? That's not praise. That's disrespect wearing lip gloss. And people do this because they want two things at the same time. They want to hit you and still look innocent. That's why public devaluing is so annoying. It's sneaky. It's slippery. It's designed to make you react emotionally so they can suddenly act confused. Now you're the sensitive one. Classic. That's one of the oldest tricks in the book. Throw a rock, hide the hand, then look shocked when the window breaks. And if you've ever sat there in public smiling through it, laughing it off, acting cool, but feeling that heat rise in your chest. First of all, you are not crazy. You caught something real. Your body knew before your mind had the words, because disrespect has a frequency, and your nervous system can hear it. Sometimes before your logic does. That's why you leave certain interactions replaying the moment like a detective in a hoodie. Wait, what was that? Was that a joke? Was that shade? Was I overthinking? Did they mean that? Baby, probably. Not always, but probably. And here's the thing I really want you to hear. When people try to lower your value publicly, they are usually trying to solve something privately. That's the real story. A private inferiority, a private envy, a private wound, a private identity problem, a private fear of being overlooked, a private fear that they are not enough unless someone else is made smaller. And because they can't say, hey everyone, I'm feeling deeply threatened right now, they do the next best thing. They perform superiority, which is always funny to me because fake superiority has such a specific smell. It smells like tension, like trying too hard, like eyes scanning the room after the joke to see who laughed, like needing confirmation, like fishing for allies, like insecurity with a microphone. And Jung would say this is what happens when people don't deal with their shadow. They become driven by it. The part they refuse to know starts running the show from backstage. And now they're not relating to you as you really are. They're relating to what you trigger in them. That's why the reaction feels bigger than the situation. Because it is. You're not just dealing with a comment. You're dealing with a whole hidden emotional storage unit. And sometimes, this is important, there may be a tiny little hook. Jung talked about how projection can hang on a small hook, meaning sometimes they may grab one tiny thing that is technically real. Maybe you did make a mistake. Maybe you are still learning. Maybe you do have a flaw. Maybe you did stumble once. And they take that tiny hook and hang 10 tons of emotional nonsense on it. That's why the reaction feels disproportionate, because it is not really about the little thing. The little thing is just the hanger. The real weight comes from what they're carrying. That's why one small comment from you becomes their full documentary series. Episode 1. Why your confidence annoys me. Episode 2. Why your growth is suspicious. Episode 3. Let me bring this up in front of everybody so I can feel alive. And if you're laughing, it's because you know exactly the kind of person I'm talking about. Matter of fact, if this video is hitting already, tell me in the comments, what's the weirdest public jab somebody ever threw at you? Not because we're collecting trauma. No, we're collecting evidence. Now let's go deeper. Why does public disrespect hurt so much more than private disrespect? Simple. Because public spaces touch identity. When someone tries to devalue you in front of others, they are not only trying to affect how you feel, they're trying to affect how you are seen. That's why it stings. Because human beings are social creatures. We all know reputation matters, belonging matters, respect matters. So when somebody throws shade in front of a group, part of what hurts is not the words themselves, it's the attempted rewrite. It's the little social script they're trying to install. This person is less than. This person is not that important. This person should not be taken seriously. This person can be mocked safely. That's why public devaluing is often a power play, not real power. Costume power, inflatable power. The kind that looks big until you poke it once and hear sad little air noises. But make no mistake, it is a social move. And a lot of people use it because they understand one thing. If they can influence the room, they can temporarily protect their ego. Temporarily. That's the key word. Because fake power always needs maintenance. That's why people who play this game never seem relaxed. They're always checking, always comparing, always measuring the energy, always worried about who's getting attention, always trying to manage the vibe. Exhausting. Imagine needing a full audience just to feel okay. No thank you. And here's where I want to free somebody watching this. Their public disrespect is not proof of your low value. A lot of times it's proof that your value was felt. That's why they reacted. Think about it. People don't usually waste strategic energy trying to discredit what feels irrelevant. They go after what has presence, what has impact, what threatens their position, what exposes their insecurity, what reminds them of something unfinished in themselves. So the next time somebody tries to make you look small in a room, pause before you automatically believe the performance. Because the loudest person is not always the strongest one. Sometimes the loudest person is just the one leaking. And yes, I said leaking. Spiritually leaking, emotionally leaking, socially leaking. No towel in sight. Now let's make this practical. What do you do when somebody tries to lower your value in public? Because I know some of you are like, okay, cool, Jung, shadow projection, wonderful. But what do I actually do when Brenda says something wild at brunch? Fair question. First thing, do not rush to defend your whole existence. That's the trap. The moment they make a little public jab, they want movement. They want panic. They want a long explanation. They want you to start over-explaining yourself, so the room starts looking at you like you're on trial. Don't give them free theater. Silence is powerful when it's clean. A calm face is powerful. A short response is powerful. A small smile is powerful. A simple, "What do you mean by that?" is powerful. Oh, that one right there, dangerous. Because now they have to drag their little hidden insult into the sunlight and explain it. And a lot of public disrespect dies the moment it has to become specific. What do you mean by that? Can you repeat that? That was an odd thing to say. I'm not sure why that needed to be said here. Interesting. Anyway, Do you see how elegant that is? No breakdown, no Oscar speech, no wrestling in the mud. Because when you are secure, you don't have to do gymnastics to prove you deserve respect. You act like somebody whose value is not under emergency review. That's the energy. Second, do not confuse visibility with truth. Just because something happened in front of people does not mean the room agreed with it. A lot of you assume everybody believed the disrespect because it happened publicly. Not true. Some people in the room saw exactly what happened. Some people clocked the jealousy immediately. Some people noticed the weird energy. Some people were uncomfortable for you. Some people lost respect for the person doing it. Trust me, public disrespect often reveals more about the attacker than the target, especially to emotionally intelligent people. The room is not always as blind as your anxiety tells you it is. Third, stop trying to win over people who enjoy misunderstanding you. Please. That is a full-time job with no salary and terrible benefits. Some people are committed to reading you wrong because it helps them keep their emotional story alive. If they admit your value, then they have to face themselves, and they're not trying to do all that. They came to brunch, not therapy. So let them have their little script if they want it. You stay real. Fourth, learn to separate shame from truth. This one matters. When somebody embarrasses you in public, shame rises fast, and shame is loud. Shame says, maybe they're right. Maybe everybody sees me as weak. Maybe I am foolish. Maybe I should shrink. Maybe I should talk less. Maybe I should be less visible. No, slow down. That feeling is real, but that feeling is not automatically accurate. Sometimes shame is just your body responding to social exposure. It does not mean the insult was true. And if you build your identity around avoiding that feeling, you will start shrinking yourself to make insecure people comfortable. That is too expensive. Do not pay for peace with your personality. I need that on a hoodie. Do not pay for peace with your personality. Because that's what a lot of people do after repeated public jabs. They get quieter, smaller, less expressive, less joyful, less visible, less bold, not because they changed, because they got trained. And one thing about insecure environments, they love training bright people to dim themselves. No more of that. If your light makes somebody reach for sarcasm, that is information. If your growth makes somebody start joking more aggressively, that is information. If your confidence suddenly brings out a critic that was never this loud before, that is information. Observe it. Don't worship it. Now, let me say something a little funny and a little painful. Some people cannot clap for you because their hands are too busy holding together an identity. That's really what it is. Your value threatens identities built on comparison. If somebody only feels special when they're the funniest, prettiest, smartest, most desired, most praised, most spiritually enlightened, most tragic, most anything, your presence can feel like competition even if you are not competing. And let me free you from another burden. You are not required to play ugly just because somebody else is insecure. You do not need to downplay your intelligence so they feel calm. You do not need to dress down your beauty. You do not need to mute your success. You do not need to laugh smaller, dream smaller, speak smaller, exist smaller. That is not humility. That is social hostage negotiation. And we're done with that. Now, does this mean every person who criticizes you is projecting? No. Let's be grown for 2 seconds. Sometimes people are just giving feedback. Sometimes you did mess up. Sometimes correction is valid. Sometimes the room is not against you. Sometimes a joke is really just a joke. But you can feel the difference. Come on now. You can. One feels clean. The other feels loaded. One corrects behavior. The other attacks identity. One says, "Here's something to improve." The other says, "Let me make sure your value drops while I'm talking." That's different, and your spirit knows the difference. That heavy, weird, performative sting. That's usually not guidance. That's ego behavior in a fancy jacket. And once you start seeing it this way, something beautiful happens. You stop personalizing every public jab. You stop collapsing. You stop spiraling. You stop assuming every attack is a verdict. And you start reading behavior with more wisdom. You start saying, "Ah, that comment had fear in it. That joke had envy in it. That correction had performance in it. That little smile had competition in it. That whole moment was not random." And suddenly you're less shaken, because clarity is calming, confusion creates panic, clarity creates posture, and that posture, that's what these people hate the most. Not your perfection, your posture, your refusal to crumble on schedule, your refusal to become tiny because they made the room awkward. That kind of steadiness is powerful, and let me tell you something hilarious. When you stop reacting the way insecure people expect, they often get even weirder because the script failed. They wanted a flinch. They got composure. They wanted you scrambling. They got stillness. They wanted to manage your self-image, and now they're standing there with a joke that didn't land and an ego that just slipped on its own banana peel. Beautiful. A spiritual event. So next time it happens, remember this line: public disrespect is often private pain looking for witnesses. That line alone will save you so much confusion. And here's another one. When people cannot digest their own shadow, they try to feed it to you. No thank you. Send it back to the kitchen. You don't have to swallow every projection somebody serves. And for the people watching this who have been targeted a lot, in family spaces, friend groups, workplaces, churches, schools, relationships, listen to me carefully. It is possible that people kept trying to lower your value, not because you were weak, but because something about you was hard to manipulate. That matters. Sometimes what they call too much is just your aliveness. Sometimes what they call attitude is your boundaries. Sometimes what they call showing off is you no longer hiding your gifts. Sometimes what they call sensitive is you noticing disrespect instead of normalizing it. Sometimes what they call different is you refusing to be trained into dead energy. Don't let people rename your strength until you forget what it is. That is one of the oldest social games in the world. Rename, reduce, repeat, no more. Call things what they are. Projection is projection. Envy is envy. Mockery is mockery. A power play is a power play. And once you stop romanticizing people's bad behavior, you become harder to shake. Not cold, just clear. And clear people are dangerous to manipulators, because clear people don't keep volunteering for confusion. So, if this has ever happened to you, I want you to leave this video with one new rule. Do not measure your value by the comfort level of insecure people. That ruler is broken. You will look too much to people committed to being less. You will look arrogant to people who think self-respect is rebellion. You will look different to people who survive on sameness. You will look threatening to people who build identity through comparison. Let them feel what they feel. Your job is not to become digestible to everybody. Your job is to become real. And the realest thing you can do sometimes is stay unshaken in a room where somebody expected you to shrink. That right there, that is high-level energy. That is grown energy. That is, I see what you're doing, and I'm not signing for the package energy. And honestly, that's attractive too. Calm is attractive. Self-possession is attractive. Not taking the bait is attractive. That's why the strongest people in the room are often not the loudest ones. They're the ones who don't abandon themselves when the weirdness starts. So if you needed this reminder today, here it is. Their public opinion is not your final price. Their discomfort is not your identity. Their projection is not your mirror. And their attempt to lower you says more about what they battle than what you are worth. Jung gave us a language for this. But you don't need a psychology degree to feel the truth of it. People often attack in others what they cannot face in themselves. That's why some of the most disrespectful behavior comes from the most internally fragile people. Not all, but many. And once you really get that, you stop bleeding in places where you should have been observing. You stop begging to be seen fairly by people invested in seeing you small. And you start standing in your value with a little more peace, a little more humor, and a lot less confusion. So the next time somebody throws a public jab, don't immediately think, what's wrong with me? Maybe ask, what got touched in them? That question will save you. And if this video spoke to you, drop a comment with, I know my value. I want to see who's still standing. I want to see who's done shrinking. I want to see who finally understands that not every attack is a truth. Some attacks are just confessions in disguise. And if this hit home for you for real, hit that like button, subscribe, and if you want to show love, tap that thanks button too, because we're building a place here where people stop doubting themselves every time somebody insecure gets theatrical in public. And trust me, we are just getting started.